Good evening and welcome back to 613 Divelab Coffee Chat. We're back at it again. It's been a few days. In fact, it's probably been more than a few days. I'm Diver Dave. I'm sitting here in the Dive Lab enjoying what looks like a coffee, but it's actually water. It's 9 p.m., so the coffee time is done. As always, I always take a minute to say 613 Dive is a local private scuba instructor business here in Ottawa, Ontario. I do most of my diving and teaching out in the glorious St. Lawrence River, which is a awesome dive playground. I always tell folks it's great to go down and dive down south, but boy, if you can learn to be a decent diver in the St. Lawrence, you can probably dive anywhere. But we've got a pretty packed agenda tonight again, and so let's see if we can get through it all. Let's quickly take a moment to talk about the weather. The weather has changed again. So we had a massive amount of snow here, I guess overnight and this morning. And so the dive conditions are now basically once again not that diveable, which is a real contrast to last weekend because Reese and I were literally on our way and we were diving this time last weekend. So yeah, things have changed, but you know what? It's a matter of time. I know we have some ice storm and bad ice weather coming, but let's see if it happens. All that to say, though, is there was no diving going on this weekend, unfortunately. But like I said, it's a matter of time. And eventually, we will get back. Once we have some folks in the chat, please reach out. Don't feel like you have to wait to ask questions. I do my best to sort of hit those and handle those questions on the fly. We do have a new chat feature, which is live, and let's see if it works. So I see we do have Mr. TS online, and so Mr. TS, maybe what you can do is give me a quick test and tell me, does it show up on the screen for you in terms of your chat? It looks like it does. It's something we've been working on. Oh, cool. Awesome. Hope all is well with you. And let's see if we can get through the agenda. And like I said, I believe you asked a question about a DPV, and I'm going to tackle that one a little bit later in the session. All right, so new dive season did start. That's the good news, which was last weekend. Reese and I did get out for a dive on Saturday at Centene Park. It was a cold one. I mean, we had a nice day, but the water was cold. 34, 35 degree Fahrenheit. So we did a 28-minute dive, and you know what? We were like, that's good enough. Our hands were getting pretty cold. We don't have heated gloves, so. The good news is Reese had not dove since, I think, mid-December. And he looked pretty good. Like, it didn't take him long to get the doubles back under control and get some drills in, and overall buoyancy looked great. But it was a cold one. It was great to get a dive in. It was a short dive, but it was a dive, so we're not complaining. And TS, yes, you're right. We are definitely lucky to get back in already. But this is where the dry suits come in, buddy. But all that to say is there were not a lot of people diving. There were a few, but it'll start to get busier as the warmer gets better, the weather gets better. All right, I wanted to include a photo of the day, and this kind of ties in to the dry suits. So let's give it a quick look. And if you come out of the dry suit, and if the bottom of your dry suit legs look like that, I'm going to hope that you realize you might have a leaky dry suit. Your dry suit should not look like bell-bottom pants. And so if your dry suit is looking like this, you've got a leak somewhere that you're going to have to take care of pretty quickly. So just keep that in mind. This was a photo that I found from a dry suit class 2 years ago. And it was always a little comical as he was coming out of the pool, and we were wondering why he was struggling so much with his buoyancy being so feet heavy. Well, there you go. You know, this would explain it. So Unfortunately, he chased some dry suit leaks in this one for quite a while, and I don't think we ever got them all sorted out. So, but like I said, if your dry suit looks like that coming out of a dry suit dive, you might have a problem. So what is going on locally at 613 Dive and sort of in our local dive area? Well, for those that do know, we have a bunch of different dive spots locally along the St. Lawrence River that are really good. Centene Park, of course, like we've discussed before, is a very good dive site in terms of being able to practice, go for dives, and in terms of just doing some training there. We actually have a smaller dive site that is just down the road from Centene Park called Reynolds Yard. And we actually, when I say we, I think Save Ontario Shipwrecks Thousand Islands chapter, I think back in 2021, we put in a bunch of aluminum stairs to get into the water. And so now we have very nice access to leave from there. There's no shallow end. It's immediately down to, I think, around 12 feet, and then off you go. But it is a second site to dive from. And for those who are like DPV divers and technical divers who like to go out into the river and do bigger dives, it's a whole lot easier to leave from there than it is to sort of migrate and manage your way through the big crowds at Centene Park. All that to say is the Reynolds Yard steps are going to go back in. These are very wide aluminum steps. And we pull them out every year because otherwise the ice would most likely crush them. And we're going to be putting them back in on April 5th. So I believe that's next Saturday. And I think it sounds like I'm the one who volunteered to actually get in the water. So it is what it is. But it'll be nice to get those steps in because that's actually a very nice dive site to use in terms of the more advanced divers. I actually used that site on day 2 of my open water course because from an access perspective, I feel like it provides a little bit more stress to the divers in terms of getting into the water. So I can sort of simulate what it feels like to jump off a charter boat because there's a nice concrete slab there that we can giant stride off into the water. And TS, you got it. Good, for sure. So Reynolds steps, fingers crossed, gets back in. TS, are you familiar with Reynolds Yard? Excellent. I actually put in a nice little navigation circuit off the trampoline at Reynolds Yard. It's a little hard to find, but I use it for my nav course when I'm teaching my navigation course to students. But anyway, Reynolds Yard is a nice little spot. I like it. It's a good jump off point to get out into the river and do some bigger dives. So looking forward to get those steps in. Okay, dive toolbox item of the week. And I've got a few things here. For those that do know and for those that don't know, I did sort of release a ultimate dive toolbox video this week, or actually yesterday. So I'd been working on that one all week. And literally it's a video about if you're a new diver, these would be some of the things if you want to build out a dive toolbox that you should probably be thinking about in terms of putting in your own toolbox. But I grabbed a few of the tools out of that toolbox because I wanted to go into a little bit more of a further explanation of why these tools would be needed. So the first tool is a pretty simple one, right? It's a valve tool. And it is really used to just sort of remove or install the valve handle. All right, there's a little sort of nut or screw here that needs a sort of specialized flathead screwdriver, and then you can sort of tighten that nut down. So I wanted to actually just quickly go over this because this is something that I cover in my equipment overview with new divers in their open water course, and it's always something that grabs a bit of their interest. So I just wanted to switch cams and get a little bit of a close-up. And so here we are. This is a pretty simple valve. It's an old OMS valve that I would no longer use because it's yoke only, and it doesn't even allow you to actually do the conversion. So this one kind of sits in my drawer as a bit of a demo valve. And you can see here, if I bring this up to the camera here, you can see that this nut screws all the way in to keep the valve knob on, but you have to be very careful because if you screw it down too tight, then the operation of the valve knob becomes way too stiff. But then, of course, if you leave it too loose, because there's a spring underneath here, you have to be very careful. And I think if we get up close, could we see the spring? Yeah, you can sort of see the spring inside there. And if I had to undo this just a few more turns, maybe even in a half a turn, the whole thing would pop off and the valve would fall off. And so this tool comes in handy. All right, where I can actually screw that in. A little difficult to do this while I'm looking. All right. And I got to do it left hand, which is no good for me. And so really what you're doing is you're trying to screw that down where this really just becomes nice and flush. Like I said, you don't want it too tight, but you certainly don't want it too loose. And so for me, that could be a little bit more. And so let's take a quick look at that in the camera, and you can see that's pretty flush now. To me, that's where it needs to be. All right. And so why am I showing this? Well, guess what? These things come loose. All right. That's the whole point of showing this, is that these little nuts can back off to the point where that spring actually just pops off the whole bit. And then the challenge becomes now the knob falls off your tank. That's a bit of a critical situation in my mind. All right. So that's the challenge. So always take a moment when you're doing your equipment overview reviews. And this is, like I said, something I teach my open water students, but always take a moment and just make sure you're feeling that to make sure it's flush. So just keep that in mind. That's why you have this tool inside your toolbox. It's a very handy one to have. It's pretty cheap. It's like $12. All right. So it's not a ton of money, but handy to have. And I'm going to get to the next one in a sec. Let's talk about this tool, which is a Schrader tool next. And you can see that this has a little bit of a hole in the middle, and it has a little bit of sort of teeth on the end of it. And so why do we need a Schrader tool valve? Well, I'll tell you why. This would be a BCD or a dry suit hose. And if you took a look right there, you can see that there is a pin right in the middle of that valve, or right in the middle of that hose or the connector. That is where the Schrader valve actually sits. And when you press this thing down, because this whole thing is a spring clip connection, all right, when this connects into your low pressure inflator hose or your dry suit valve, that actually presses down and allows the air connection to happen. So why do I need this tool? Well, this is the Schrader tool. So what happens is this allows you to actually use inside, and sometimes these Schrader tool pins can come undone and they start to leak. And so now this will actually firmly sit over the top of that Schrader valve, and then you can hand tighten to make sure that it's tight. So again, it's a $12 tool. This is why you have it in your toolkit. If you're having a leaky low pressure inflator hose or a dry suit hose, this might be the answer. It might not be the answer, but it could be. And again, for $12, certainly worth putting in your dive toolkit. I hope that makes sense. And last but not least, TS, are you ready for this one? I hope you're ready for this one, because self-reliant diver, right? All right. So this is not one that you would have thought about for your self-reliant diving. So check this out. Let's say here's your scenario. And I've got an old bent valve here, by the way, if you can, I got to get used to this camera. But you can see that valve is bent. It no longer has a knob on it. And this came from a student who dropped his tank off the bench, and it ended up just bending the whole thing. And now it's just, again, a bit of a demo valve that I use. And so now, because the knob is gone, it's going to be very hard to actually turn that valve. So imagine this. Here's the scenario. You're self-reliant diving. You're on your own. You have your pony tank. In some ways, you have an emergency. You lose your back gas. Whatever the scenario is, now you have to go right to your pony tank. You're going to turn the valve on your pony tank only to realize that there's no more knob. It fell off. And it fell off because if you remember, you didn't check that that nut was tight. Well, not tight, but in the right position. And so now you have no way of actually accessing your pony tank. So what do you do? All right. So this was a trick that was taught to me by the wizard, by the way. And this always sits in my dry suit pocket. And so this is a old spare valve knob that I literally just drilled a hole through the side. I put a single ender on it that clips into my dry suit pocket on my right side. And now, if I ever ran into a situation where I had a knob that had fallen off, I can literally just use it. I can sort of put it on. Just like that. And now I can either tighten or I can open the valve. How about that for a self-reliant diver tip? So now I have a way of actually using a opening and closing a valve even though the knob fell off. And like I said, that is a tip from the wizard. So I always have that knob sitting in my dry suit pocket. We'll switch on back. So that's pretty handy. That's just an old knob off a valve. Drilled a hole through it, single ender. Again, it doesn't take up a whole lot of space in my dry suit pocket. And why would this even be more important than just a self-reliant diver? Well, on the technical diving side, imagine the same scenario where I'm coming back from a technical dive and now I've got, let's say, 20, 30 minutes of deco, planned deco, and I'm going to start to move through my 50% nitrox and my 100% O2 just to sort of accelerate my deco. And one of my decompression stages, the knob fell off. And so now I'm going to be basically facing a ton more deco, and hopefully I better have planned for that, by the way. But because I can't access my deco gas, because I can't access the knob or the valve, get the valve open, now I'm looking at a whole lot longer decompression. So if I just had the spare knob in my pocket, I could literally just deploy the knob, get my deco gas open, and I'm still under my main deco schedule. So I hope that helps. It's not an expensive thing to do. Something to keep in mind. Any questions on that? Okay. Let's get into dive gear discussion. And this is a good one too, because let me just get rid of this for a sec. All right, let's get into dive gear discussion. I'm going to ask the question, BCD versus backplate wing. It's a tough one because all of the students, or most of the students, by the way, we get taught in a jacket style BCD. That's kind of the norm. And eventually, if you're like me, you start to see other folks diving with these things called backplate and wings and harnesses. And then you start to realize, that might be the better way to go. So then the question is, why don't we actually teach right out of the gate with a backplate wing? And I'm actually not sure as to the answer of why we don't. It might be cost to the rental shops. I'm sure the setups are a whole lot more money. But I know for Reese, I put Reese into a backplate wing pretty much right off the bat in terms of his training as a new diver. And it did not take long for him to get sort of horizontally trimmed out. So I'm not too sure why rental or dive shops don't use backplate wing more often. I know EPSO have backplate wings in their rental sort of fleet because I know I helped out with a couple of students last year and they were using them. But it could be cost. I'm not exactly sure. So what are the advantages of a backplate wing? Well, the advantages of a backplate and a wing is the wing, because all the air is now on your back. There's no air wrapped around in sort of the jacket style BCD. It's all centralized across your back. More expensive for scuba shop for sure, says TS. No doubt. But if you're a new diver learning and you're going to invest at least, okay, get through the course, get the rental gear, you're learning a jacket style BCD. But if you are then saying, hey, I am really going to go pretty hardcore into this sport, there may not be a reason to actually go jacket style right off the bat. Unless, like you're saying, is it could be finances. But you know what? Marketplace, there's a lot of used gear for sale, a lot of used backplate wings. And the good news is I have a really nice backplate wing set up here I wanted to show you guys. So I dove backplate wing all through my recreational. I ditched my BCD jacket style very quickly. Reese has the exact same Scuba Pro X-Tech setup that I use on my recreational setup. It's pretty beat in terms of all the pool exposure and all the diving I've been doing as far as teaching. But I did run to KDS today and said, hey, what do you got that I could actually show on the video that's a really nice backplate wing setup? And so I have a Halcyon setup here, which is a 40-pound lift. So basically single tank with a pony type sort of setup. It's not big enough to run a set of doubles, but it is a really nice recreational backplate wing harness setup. So I was going to pull that out of the bag real quick. And it's actually the next video I'm going to work on is backplate wing versus jacket style BCD. So it's something I'm starting to put together, but I was just going to pull this one out of the bag real quick and we could take a look. So the nice part about Halcyon is it comes with the nice Halcyon bag, of course. By the way, Halcyon is not cheap. So I'm not trying to sit here and say that this thing is, these things, it's quality gear. You're going to pay for it, but it's very quality gear. All right. So here we are. Fresh out of the box. Never used, never dove. Really nice gear. It does have padded harness straps. I'm not a big fan of padded shoulder straps, by the way. But these seem to be, I'm actually not sure if they are removable. But for me, I mean, I would be happy with this, of course, but I don't need padded shoulder straps. But overall, this is a 40-pound wing. It has a very nice double strap for the tanks. It has a single tank adapter. It has very nice straps to sort of secure your tanks. And it has nice little weight pockets on each side of the harness. And overall, I mean, it has a aluminum backplate. So I'm going to say this probably comes in at about 2 or 3 pounds for the aluminum backplate. I dive a steel backplate. I like the weight of a steel backplate, but this would be a bit better for traveling, of course, to put this in my suitcase. I am actually looking for a new backplate wing when I'm teaching in the river because the pool has basically destroyed my old X-Tech. So I don't know if this is the one that I would buy because I like red and black. Of course, it fits the 613 dive color scheme, but there's no doubt that I could be persuaded to dive with this really nice piece of gear. So I know KDS is a Halcyon dealer, and they have a few things in stock in terms of the Halcyon gear. It's extremely nice. And TS, you're right. I mean, will we pay more for all the scuba gear with tariffs? If it's coming from the States, it's probably a guarantee the answer is yes. So it's a great question. I'm not sure. I know some of the dive shops, KDS in particular, they're starting to look into this to say, hey, what's the impact here? The good news is that there's no tariffs on the stuff that's already in stock. So I don't know the cost on this one. I know if I had to buy the equivalent Hollis, it's somewhere in the $1,100 range. I'm going to assume this is probably somewhere between the $1,200 and $1,500 range. So like I said, not cheap, but very, very good gear, like very high quality. So I wanted to quickly just sort of share that with you guys. And like I said, it's actually the next video I'm going to work on because I feel like the backplate wing, when I was a new diver, I did not quite understand the backplate wing concept. I was like, oh, that's got to be for these techie folks. And that's not actually the case. And while I was already pretty good at the core skills by the time I switched over, my buoyancy was not bad. As soon as I got into that backplate wing, boy, it really sort of helped trim me out horizontally in the water column. So that was, I wish I would have done it sooner. And I knew, I said to myself, if Reese really gets serious about this, and he did a couple of years back, I was like, I'm putting him in a backplate wing as soon as I can. Trim is definitely easier with the backplate. What's the downside? Well, some would argue that the downside is, that there's no more pockets, right? There's a couple pockets for weights. And then depending on what you're diving, and maybe it's a steel tank, you may not even need much weight. But the argument there is, well, how much stuff do you really need to be taking with you? Right? As you progress as a diver, you start to realize that all this shit hanging off my stuff that I bought from the dive shop that was cool, you can just ditch all that. Most of that stuff's not needed. And if you really do need to take some stuff with you, an SMB, extra flashlight, an extra mask, of course, if you're not diving dry suit, then I would highly encourage, go look at a really good pair of tech shorts, like I've talked before. Any of the students I've been diving with who go like, Dave, I want to sort of start to streamline my stuff, I go buy a good pair of tech shorts. I own a pair of those Fourth Element tech shorts like I've talked about in the past. I love them when I'm diving wetsuit, which is not that often. Tech shorts are the way to go. Thigh pocket, I tell you what, TS, man, I had a thigh pocket and that thing drove me nuts. Like the stupid, I called it the leg bag, the stupid leg bag. And like the straps would always come, like it didn't come on. Like just, dude, I hated the leg bag. And then the leg bag was, I guess I probably cheaped out and bought a small one. And so trying to get the mask in and out and the SMB, it was just a pain in the ass. So when I did my first level of tech training, I ended up buying a really nice pair of the Fourth Element tech shorts. And that is really where I started to notice the bigger pockets really seem to help, and having two pockets instead of one. So again, tech shorts, if you don't know what they are, go to the local dive shop. Like I said, Fourth Element or Apex makes extremely nice tech shorts. The Apex are a little bit hard to get. The Fourth Element ones are just as nice. The pockets are great. But again, it's a bit of an investment. I think a good pair of tech shorts is somewhere in the $250 to $290 range Canadian. Well, you know, TS, I'm not a small dude either. So, I mean, if I can find them, you should be okay. How is by the way, how is the online chat working? Is it still working pretty good in terms of being on screen? Cool. That was my first attempt at trying to get the chat working on screen. So we'll continue to make it better. And TS, I know you talked to me about DPV, so we'll get there. All right, let's see what else we've got on the go. All right, this one is going to be somewhat controversial. We'll see. Let's see how this one goes. But this is a big pet peeve of mine. And I'm just gonna break this down into a few areas. So I say teaching is a ton of fun. I enjoy teaching. I don't enjoy teaching big groups. I've learned a ton watching and being part of big groups being taught, but I learned enough to say it's not really what I was interested in. I said right away, I knew it. I just wanted to teach one-on-one and just like maybe two folks at the most, because then I knew I could give them a lot of my time. And if we needed to come back the next day or the next weekend, then I know I had the time. I was not against the clock. But all that to say is teaching is fun. But if all I did is teach scuba diving, I don't know if I would keep the passion for diving, because I love diving more than I love teaching. And I got into diving because I was very passionate about it. And so the message here is, if you're an instructor, and the reason I'm bringing this up is because this is a bit of a recurring theme for some of the instructors that I know. Not all of them, by the way. Not all of them. But some of the instructors at some point become so busy teaching that they lose their passion for diving. And they say things like, well, man, diving's not fun anymore. And my point to them is, well, actually what you're doing, this is not really diving, it's teaching. Diving is going out on your own for a great dive with like no stress. Going out with a buddy on a great dive with no stress. Teaching, there's always stress. And the bigger the group, the bigger the stress. But as long as you're always teaching, you've always got that pressure on you to sort of make sure that not just yourself, but all of these students are okay and making sure that they're going to make it through the course. There's the timing and the clock, all the stuff you got to worry about. But if you're just diving just to dive, there's a whole lot less stress. And so I always try to talk to my instructor buddies and say, look, man, if you are losing the passion for diving, it might be time to roll back a little bit of the teaching and just focus on the diving. I got into this a little bit last year because to be a tech instructor eventually, I needed to get at least 25 certifications underneath as a recreational instructor. And so I really went on a run in terms of private courses last year to get these 25 certifications. And there were a few back-to-back-to-back weekends where I was just full pin teaching private courses. And again, that's way easier than teaching big groups. But even for me, I was starting to feel the pain of the teaching. I was like, wow, I am not getting any time on my own just to go for a dive. And that's really what drives me in terms of being passionate about this hobby, is the diving piece, right? And so it's just a message that I always want to sort of relay back to my instructor buddies and folks who I don't even know, to say, hey, if you're losing a little bit of the passion for diving, you might want to just take a quick look and say, well, what kind of diving are you really doing? Because if you're just taking folks out through an open water course, the checkouts, you know, you could make the argument, yes, you're underwater, but it's not really diving, you're teaching. So that's the first part. Not so controversial. The next part that I can't stand is instructors and dive masters. I'm going to talk about dive masters next. Is I see this a lot, that instructors are just standing on the bottom teaching students, like literally flat-footed, fins on the ground, teaching students. And this is one of my biggest pet peeves. I don't know if that's because maybe I'm old school, maybe because I feel like we should be showing students and being the examples of what a good diver should look like. And I'm not trying to say that every skill should be neutrally buoyant. That's not the point here. But there is no skill that requires you to be flat-footed standing on the bottom. I'm just going to put it out there. There's no skill. I will be a fin pivot type instructor if I'm teaching a free flow. I might have to be on my knees if I've got someone who's really struggling with a mask and I have to really help them and be close to them. For sure, I'm not neutrally buoyant. But there's no way in hell that I am standing flat-footed on the bottom. And if I am, it's time to stop. Like I can't teach like that. So, and I agree, TS, I had great instructors too, but what I see is a very common occurrence of folks being taught by instructors who are actually, by the way, good at divers. These guys can dive, but they just stand, and what happens is the students will mimic the instructor. And if you show them that, hey, it's okay to stand up on the bottom, guess what? They're going to do that as well. And that is not diving. And my last point to this on the instructor side is I was coming back, TS, and you'll understand this. I was coming back from a long dive out in the St. Lawrence there. I hit the gasket on the way home, and then I came back into Centene Park. And I was on the rebreather, so I'm in like super silent mode, and I stayed and I saw a massive group, and I could always tell there's a big group at the platform because there's a massive silt ball. And of course, it's the weekend, and it's an open water checkout weekend. And I'm not going to say the group, the shop, or none of that stuff. But I just sat there and watched because it was a group of, I think, 6 or 7 students. I could barely tell who the dive master was. And I watched the instructor, and all the students were standing flat-footed on the flat platform. And the instructor was standing flat-footed on the platform as well. And then he kind of just penguin walked to each of the students as they did their masterals. And to me, I was like, this is not diving. Like, you are not teaching that group of divers to learn how to dive. You are literally just getting them through dive skills. And for me, it was just kind of a gross thing to watch. And then as I watched the dive master was doing the same thing. I could actually barely even make out who the dive master was. And for me, again, this is like, we should be setting the examples to students of what it's supposed to look like once you've put a ton of work in and you look like a competent diver. So that's one of my biggest pet peeves. And you're right, like TS, I'm not saying every group. There's no, I mean, I've seen some really good instructors, and I sit there and watch and I take notes because like, oh wow, they did it that way. That's actually pretty good. So I'll take a note and kind of steal that. And then I actually hold dive masters even more accountable on this argument than I do instructors, because instructors have a ton of work to do and a ton of responsibility in terms of helping the student get through the skills. But if I see a dive master who's not actually demoing a skill, really their job is to be sort of watching out over the herd. And if they're not sort of really trimmed out, neutrally buoyant, back and forth behind the students, in and out, if they're just standing around, for me, it's like, guys, you got to get off the bottom. Like, you are the example. I was really lucky to learn from a couple of really strong dive masters early on in my dive career. And they showed me right away. I was like, wow, these guys look way different than me in the water. Why is that? And it's because their buoyancy and their core skills were just so on point. And, I learned pretty quickly after that. So I'm always pretty hard on dive masters. And I know DM1, well, if you ever talk to DM1, she'll tell you, she's like, oh man, that's one of my biggest pet peeves. If I come across a group, especially in the pool, if I see you standing on the bottom of the pool, it just drives me nuts. So I challenge all the DMs. You should be able to do all of the pool work, the open water checkouts. If you're not neutrally buoyant, you should definitely not be standing on the bottom. I hope that makes sense. Well, all right. So what do we got next? 613 Dive, upcoming certification openings. Dry suit rentals for one-on-one private sessions are now in place. So that's pretty cool. So this has always been a bit of a challenge for me because dry suit course is one of the ones that I really enjoy teaching. I've spent a lot of time in diving my dry suit. And in fact, I don't dive the wetsuit at all. But I really enjoyed teaching one-on-one dry suit courses. The challenge has always been that the dry suit is a pretty massive investment for folks. And there's always a little bit of nervousness. Folks would be like, well, I don't know if I fit in a dry suit. I don't know if I'm going to take to the dry suit. I don't know if it's going to be for me, if I'm going to like it. Of course, folks are always a little worried about the whole feet in the air scenario, and it kind of stresses people out a little bit. And so the great news is, because of KDS, Canada Diving Supply, and again, shout out to Jeff, the owner, who has always been super supportive of me and my 613 Dive sort of private track here. And they offer up dry suit rentals. And so now I have access to their dry suit rental fleet of dry suits. So that's great news, because now if you are thinking about taking a dry suit certification, but you aren't sure about owning a dry suit yet, then I now have access to teach you in a private way, and I can get you a rental dry suit. So again, huge thanks to Jeff and Canada Diving Supply there. There is going to be a couple of rules here, and we have to be careful with dry suits because, and I'll let you guys do your own investigation, but there has been some deaths over the last 3 or 4 years in dry suits and sort of, bit of malpractice and some of the instructor stuff. I'm not going to get into all that, but there have unfortunately been people who have lost their lives. And so if you are going to take a dry suit course with me, and I know Canada Diving Supply is very strict on this as well, then the dry suit has to stay in the shop or with the instructor until the day of the course, because we just want to avoid the possibility of someone renting a dry suit, taking it home, and figuring out, hey, the course is 2 weeks from now, but let me go get some dry suit time in to figure this out, and then God forbid something happens. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's a pretty big story, TS, as you know, and it's you know what? The Dive Talk folks had a pretty good summary on this one as well. I think it was like a 3-part series. I watched it all. It's, I guess it's all secondhand knowledge. I don't know exactly, but if I'm taking it at what I was hearing, it's actually just a horrible story. So all that to say is I can do one-on-ones. I can teach dry suit. You can actually rent a dry suit through me. I will have to keep the dry suit, of course, but at least it's now available in case you didn't want to make the investment up front. Yeah, exactly. So TS, you're saying the same thing. So all that to say is, what do I have in terms of dry suit availability? Right now, I have 3 dry suit courses, private dry suit courses available. So these would be one-on-one sessions. The dry suit course itself is it's a 1-day event. There's 3 dry suit dives, but if we need to take a few more dives or another day, that's what we do. And as well, there's also another option, which is a little bit more money in terms of the private space, that I actually will get you over here for an evening as well. And we do a complete breakdown of a dry suit. I take my old Fourth Element, which I have a love-hate relationship with, and I no longer dive. We'll take all the valves off. We take the neck seals off. We put the wrist seals on and off. We go over all of it so I use that one as a bit of a demo. So you kind of walk away really having feel like, okay, now I understand how all of this works, as well as how I could sort of do some maintenance on it. Facebook group update. TS, are you a member of the 613 Dive Facebook group? Ah, even better. I love it. Thank you. Appreciate it. That Facebook group keeps growing. So we are zeroing in on 800 members, which is pretty cool considering that the Facebook group pretty much started as me and 4 other guys in our open water class. And like I said before, none of them I don't even think any of them dove. So it's been pretty cool to see the growth of the Facebook group. It is a private group for those that don't know. So if you go to Facebook and search for groups, you can search for 613 Dive. If you're interested in joining, you click the join button. I get the approval thing. I take a quick look at your profile. If everything looks good and you're not some sort of bot or some sort of scammer, I hit the approve button. It's pretty simple. And to date, I think I've literally only blocked about 3 or 4 people in terms of their requests because they were scammers or they look like bots. So we've been pretty lucky. And it's interesting because Ontario Scuba Swap, I think I just saw today, and that's a big Facebook group. They're changing from public to private because they get like literally 20 or 30 scam messages a day. And so they're having a hard time even keeping up with the scamming going on or the attempted scam. So they're having to switch over from public to private. So it's interesting to see just how much junk is out there, man, in terms of the scamming. But hey, 800 members, that's pretty good. I'm looking forward to 1,000 members. I was like, if we get to 1,000 members, that'd be awesome. For those who are on the Facebook group and for those who are not, 613 Dive, we are starting to think about a 2026 dive trip. Jen, who is my dive master #1, is definitely a more seasoned diving traveler than I am. I literally go to the St. Lawrence, I do my diving, or maybe I jump in the truck and I go down south to Florida to do some cave diving. But most of the time, it's just I don't travel a ton in terms of the diving. But Jen has been sort of pushing me, and she's like, "Hey, Dave, we should really put together some sort of 2026 trip." And I'm like, you know what? I don't think it's a bad idea. And so I've said, hey, you know what? You own it. Like, you put something together, man. Like, let's talk about it. Let's collaborate. Come up with some options. What does this look like? I'm down for it. We just got to give people notice, and then let's see if we can get enough people to sort of opt into it. So we're looking at something in 2026. I don't know. There's not a whole lot more details than that yet. But I do know, based on the poll that we put out on the Facebook group, it would seem that most folks are more interested in a dive resort experience where you can stay on a dive resort. You get the options to charter dive and maybe some shore diving versus actually staying on a complete liverboard for, the 7 days. That I've never done a liverboard, so I'm not sure. And I know TS, you just says Bonaire. I actually just came back from Bonaire in November, and actually it was pretty nice. I got to say, it was not bad at all. I hated the trip to get there, but overall, Bonaire was actually nice. So it looks like, for the most part, nothing in stone. It'll most probably be some sort of dive charter sort of option. TS, have you been to Bonaire? Okay, interesting. Well, based on what I can tell so far on your diving type, you probably would enjoy it. Bonaire is actually quite unique because it is a lot of diving freedom. A lot of diving freedom. You get a little rental truck, and you can just go to all over the place and go dive. And I have to say, they did an awesome job marking all the dive sites. So for me, I am not a charter boat dive. I love the shore diving more. And it was great for me because I could just jump in the truck, go find some shore dives. I'm very comfortable diving solo, and off I went. I would dive with the group sometimes. I did some charter dives with the group as well. But for the most part, I really like jumping in the truck and just go finding some dive sites. So Bonaire is, I thought, a pretty nice dive destination, no doubt. So stay tuned on that. Let's see if we can get a trip together. It'd actually be pretty cool. All right. And I know TS wants to talk about DPVs. It's coming. How are we doing for time? Oh, wow. Pretty good. 613 dive videos. I talked about it earlier. I did just release a new Ultimate Dive Toolbox video. And so that was a work in progress over the last week. I'm glad to get that one done. It's now onto YouTube, and it's gone into the YouTube ether, and it goes from there. I get asked this question a fair bit now in terms of people are asking me, how much money do you make from the YouTube videos? Which is always pretty comical because I had no idea how money from YouTube videos actually worked. And so I'm just gonna crash the bubble right now. There's zero money in YouTube videos unless you really just somehow hit the YouTube lottery and blow up, right? But if you go into this thinking, oh man, I can't wait to make the YouTube money, you are going to be sadly disappointed. And I mean sadly. YouTube is a real challenge to make money. And if you're making money on YouTube, congrats, man. That is an accomplishment. I can tell you right now, there is no money being made from 613 Dive YouTube videos. And that was really never the point. And so if one day down the road, there's some money starts trickling in from the 613 Dive YouTube money, great. But that's not the intent. And I was trying to explain this to someone the other day, and I think it's a good message. I did a lot of diving, free diving, and spearfishing with my dad way back in the day. I mean, I grew up in the Bahamas, in Freeport, Grand Bahama Island. I have zero videos of me and my dad having some amazing dives together. I mean, I have great memories. I have nothing to capture it other than the memory, which is great. I mean, the memory's good enough. But no video, no photos, nothing. And so for me, when I see a video like, I put a small one together like for Reese and I doing a bit of a techie dive out of Centene Park there, and it's called Father and Son. When I was making that video, I was like, man, that's pretty cool. And then I realized, man, this video is going to be even cooler about 20 years from now because it's not going to go away. I mean, it's going to stay on YouTube forever, right? And like he'll have that and I'll have that. I get to sit back and I'll probably be done diving in another 25 years. And I'll just get to sit back and it's there and it's something that it's kind of archived. That experience is now archived, for us to sort of rewatch together, which will be, I think, really cool. And so all of these videos, honestly, is just a way of me being able to tap into the creative side because I've always been a bit of a creative guy. I work in IT every day. That's not so creative. I run a fairly large cloud team. Again, I love it. It's great, good career, but it's not creative. And so all these videos and all of this stuff allows me to just sort of tap into the creative side. But there is no hope of this thing like turning into like a steady stream. It just doesn't work. And I just wanted to give an example here. So for me to even consider about being monetized for YouTube, for those that don't know, and that's what it's called, being monetized, being part of the YouTube partner program, you have to have, it's 1,000 subscribers, which that's not unrealistic. I mean, that's fairly doable. And then you have to have what they call 4,000 watch hours. And to put things in perspective, my first video went out mid-January. I have right now 265 watch hours. So I'm 3,700 plus hours away from even meeting that criteria. And that's within a year. Like you have to have that all in a year. So it's very difficult. So like I said, the folks who are making money on YouTube, man, God bless them. But they are putting out videos, 2, 3, 4 a week. And I don't have the time for that, especially with dive season coming. So I would rather sort of focus on, the intent was always, can I put out videos that are going to help divers? And from there, whatever happens, happens. What I do enjoy, by the way, and I have this here, the battle of 613 Dive versus YouTube algorithm. That has been a massive learning curve, is to how to, for those that are in the techie space, how do you make your videos SEO optimized, is search engine optimization. And that is still an ongoing challenge for me, man. There's some real things and hurdles you got to jump through, and some big learning curve. Okay, self-reliant video. I decided I've got the whole game plan for the self-reliant video, but I'm actually going to put a pause on the self-reliant video because I want to actually include some in-water shots for the self-reliant video. I have quite a few cool ideas on some of the things that I want to do for the self-reliant video, and I don't think I can do it justice enough by just doing it here from the dive lab because the weather's bad. I actually want to wait for great weather so that I can really start to put some in-water video together for that self-reliant video, because I think, based on some of the ideas I have, I think it could be pretty cool. So, gonna put a quick pause on the self-reliant video. All right. I guess last but not least is 613 Dive Q&A and chat time. And what I have here is let's talk DPV, because this is going to be a quick conversation, TS. So what exactly about DPV would you like to talk about? I mean, would you like me to tell you about my DPV experience to date? That's going to be a quick conversation. But let me give you a bit of background. And because I don't know if you've noticed or not, there's been a few videos where I've actually worn the 613 Dive shirt. What is it? Finmore Scooter Less. And there's this running joke around the local dive spots here that, you know, Dave hates scooters. I actually don't hate scooters. I actually think they're pretty cool. They're expensive. But I think they're pretty cool. And I always chuckle if I'm coming out from I might be out drifting around the river and I see like scooters, you know, in the distance going by. And I'm like, you know what, that's some cool shit, because it feels like, you know, there's a bit of James Bond stuff going on. Like, you know, I grew up in the old, like, you know, Roger Moore sort of James Bond time. And you know, there'd always be like these old scooter battles and their spear guns. And it just kind of always made me rethink some of those old movies. So that was pretty good. I don't remember exactly which James Bond movie it was, but they had some scooter battles. It might have been like Moonraker, or it might have been For Your Eyes Only, one of those. But anyway, so I was at a bit of a spot back in 2022. So late 2022 November, I had done a bunch of tech diving. I started to do a bit of diving with some tech guys, including the Wizard Steph, and they were all on rebreathers. And I did this dive called the JB King. And for those that don't know, the JB King is I would say probably a pretty advanced technical dive. You know, you're looking at, I don't know, somewhere around 160 feet. It's heavy flow, a lot of river current. The visibility wasn't great. And like I said, it's deep. I was the only one on my big steel doubles, open circuit, and then I dove with a bunch of Liberty rebreather divers. And what I hated about that, there were some things that were really cool. Number one is getting there. We were all jokes on the boat right up until about the 15-minute mark. And then I watched all of these highly trained and well-seasoned divers really get into serious mode as they started to put all the gear on, start to do all the checks. And it just got to serious time. And I was like, wow, these are the folks that I would like to dive with more and learn from. So that was the first takeaway. But the second thing was, while we were diving, you know, during that dive, I can't remember the exact numbers, but I probably had, you know, I'm going to say 25 to 30 minutes of decompression time on the way back up, multiple stops. And I had a 50% stage on my left of nitrox, and I had a 100% stage on my right. And I'm switching gases on the way up, and I'm doing all these deco stops. And these guys didn't do any of that. Nothing. And I was literally just slowing them down. They had to cut their dive short because of me. Everything was just limiting because of me, and I hated that feeling. So at that point, I was like, well, I got a choice to make. Do I invest in a rebreather, which is a lot of money? I mean, the Liberty rebreather is somewhere in the $17,000 to $19,000 mark, and that was 2023. So I'm sure it's more money now. But at the same time, I was right on the edge of going, should I invest in a scooter or a DPV? And I knew at the time, because I did not want to buy a black tip, and I know TS, you just said that you wanted to buy a black tip, but if I was going to buy a scooter, I was going to buy a real nice scooter, and it was going to be like a Seacraft or one of those really fancy, expensive ones. And, those are $10,000 to $12,000. It was, it's not cheap. And I was like, well, I got a choice to make. I can either buy a scooter or I can buy a rebreather, because I knew I think I was getting some sort of corporate bonus that January. And I was like, well, it's going to go towards one or the other. And I wasn't sure, because I wasn't sure about the rebreather journey. And I have a really good buddy of mine, DM2, so Mr. Jeff, my dive master number 2, who is an amazing diver. So Jeff, I don't know if you're watching this, but shout out. Hope all you and the family are doing well. Can't wait to dive with you. He's a massive scooter guy. And he had 2 really nice scooters. And he's like, Dave, can you come out with me for a scooter dive? And I said, you know what? I'm actually on the fence right now. So I think, I'll come up with you for one dive. And so the premise was, let's go out to the Gaskin. Let's go scooter around a bit. And then let me get a bit of an experience. So I have literally, TS, one scooter dive under my belt. That's it. We did the dive. I mean, I got out to the Gaskin. It was like 4 minutes. I was like, wow, that's pretty fast. I was by no means a good scooter guy. I mean, there's a learning curve there. I'm sure I could have gotten used to it, no doubt. But I came back out of that dive thinking I was not blown away by the feeling of getting to use a scooter underwater. Was it fun? Of course. But a little bit of me felt like this is not diving. Yeah, 4 minutes. And for me to get to the Gaskin from Centene is probably, depending on what system. If I'm on the rebreather, it's 20 minutes. If I'm on my side mount, it's probably 13 minutes. So yeah, it's fast to get out to the Gaskin. And so I came out of that dive not really blown away by owning a scooter. And I was like, wow, I'm going to spend $12,000. And I know I had only just tapped into the potential of what a scooter can do. But I think I was more interested in the rebreather. And I ended up spending the more money and investing in the rebreather. And I'm glad I did it, because the rebreather for me has opened up diving to a whole nother level in terms of the amount of time I can get underwater. So there you go. I got one scooter dive under my belt. And it's always been a bit of the running joke, because like I said, all the scooter guys think I hate scooters. I actually don't hate scooters at all. If you're diving and you're having fun with your scooter, good for you. Like, just enjoy it, man. Life is too short. But for me right now, I don't think it's not something I'm that interested in. If I was a little bit older and I couldn't fin as much anymore, or maybe I had knee problem, whatever it is, man, and if that's what it takes to keep me in the water, I'm buying a scooter for sure. But I'm just not there yet. So that's kind of my take on DPVs. And I mean, there's tons of DPVs out there, man. Lots of people use them. And I get it. But the only thing I could see using a DPV for right now would be if I had a ton of river work to do. Like, it was a bit of a pain. A TS, I don't know. Would I consider it a more dangerous dive going out to the Gaskin on a DPV and being solo? I don't think so. I don't think so. As long as you've gas planned it out, make sure you got the pony tank with you. And we should even talk about that one a little bit more in terms of the size of the pony tank, but I don't think so. I mean, you always have to plan for the what if, right? So the question I would say, all right, what if the scooter died? Can you get back from the Gaskin if the scooter died? That's the question I always ask, right? If you see some of the guys, there's some really good scooter guys, and you'll notice they'll go upstream for a long scooter ride, thinking that if the scooter breaks, well, at least I have the current to help me get back. I also see folks going for long scooter rides downstream. That one to me is a little bit more of a, got a head scratch on that one. Because if the scooter breaks and you're way down river, then what? You just going to shore, I guess. I don't know what the plan is. Um, but I am by no means a scooter expert. I mean, not even close. Like I said, I was about to say, I would consider a scooter if I ended up having to do more river work. If I'm running lines, fixing stuff. I know Steph uses his scooter mostly for that. Like he'll get out in the river and he's got to go run things and do like work for SOS. He uses a scooter for sure. So a good example would be TS. I don't know. Do you own a scooter, TS? Do you own a black tip? Or you've tried one? Got it. Oh, so you did one DPV dive to the Ross Sea. I mean, that would not be a bad scooter dive. I'll tell you here's my other problem with scooters, and this is a personal thing. I've spent so much time becoming a pretty strong finner that I would be so afraid that the scooter, because it's so easy, I feel like I would just want to do it all the time and I would forget about finning. And now all of the finning skills that I've worked so hard to get would be sort of slowly deteriorating. And so I'd be a little bit worried about that. Because I think you've not gone out to the Gaskin yet, right? I think you were asking me about how to, sort of how to plan that one. Is that right? Right. So the Gaskin, for those that don't know, is a really nice wreck, 60, 65 feet. It's about a 20-minute shore dive from one of our Centene Park, which is our local scuba park. And got it. So you charter dived it. So the Gaskin is about a 20-minute. So I wouldn't call it a technical dive, but it is certainly a very advanced recreational dive for a few reasons. Number one is by the time you get out there, you're in the middle of a very busy boating traffic. On the middle of a summer day, there are boats going back and forth. I mean, all the time. So I would almost say it's a virtual overhead unless you're doing a charter dive. So going to the surface would be a bit risky. Having said that, it's about a 20-minute dive. About the last third of it is almost directly against the river. It's a little, it's not due west, but it's a strong current swim. So you have to be a pretty strong finner to get out there in a reasonable time. I've done that dive so much, and it is really where I was able to perfect a good frog kick because you're finning always into the current that last third. It's a really good way to learn how to frog kick. So I would just be worried that the DPV would just make me lazy, right? And maybe that's not a bad thing, but for me, it's just not something I just want to do yet. And when we get, when we get the weather gets a little bit better, TS, and you start diving, like I said, you're going to see the black truck there, 613 dive license plate. I'm hoping you come over and say hello. And if you got questions about the Gaskin or the self-reliance stuff, all that stuff, man, we'll just sit at the back of the truck, and I'm happy to sort of help you out and see where we can get. Because the Gaskin is a pretty cool shore dive. It's a good one to sort of get under your belt, but as long as you plan for it the right way. Have you done the ghost boat circuit at all at Centene Park? Ah, okay. So we have Centene Park. How many times have you dove at Centene Park? I'm just curious. Would you say under 50, over 50 times? What do you think the number is? Okay. Okay. So Centene Park, there is now what I call a ghost boat circuit. And I always feel like before you even consider taking on the Gaskin dive out from shore, you really should get familiar with the ghost boat circuit because the ghost boat circuit is a bit of a square that leaves Centene Park and it goes and then it comes back around and finishes at Centene Park. And so while I was drifting around the St. Lawrence, and these boats have been there for a long time, I didn't put the boats in. I was not the first to find the boats, but I would always drift off the Gaskin and I would go find these little boats. There's 5 of them. There's 4 of them. Well, there's 3 of them that are lined. And these are, boats that are 20, 25 foot in size. One is a pretty big cabin cruiser at the end that's closer to Centene Park. And so to me, I would always drift off the gaskin, and I like to navigate and sort of on the fly. And then, and I would always go and find these boats, and I would go find the next one, and the next thing I found the last one, the big cabin cruiser, and it's like, oh wow, that's close to Centene Park. So I was talking to the wizard one day. I said, you know what would be a good idea would be we should line them, and then it's for the advanced folks who just would like to do something a bit harder than Centene Park, but not go to the gaskin. Then they can go out to the ghost boat circuit. The furthest ghost boat is 52 feet, so it's a little shallower than the gaskin. It's a little closer to shore, and it's all line now. So to come back to my point in terms of why a DPV would make sense for me is I ran all the cave line between all of these boats, and it took me a while. It was probably an hour and a half dive, and some of it I had to go back against the current to run it. And so for me, not having a DPV, the DPV would have made that dive, although a little bit more complicated because now I'm having to use, both, but that is where I could see the value of the DPV. But definitely when we connect, I will show you, because the ghost boat circuit, by the way, is something that I use for my self-reliant course. Yeah. And there are some videos online that I've posted a little bit about that. So if you look at the father-son video that I posted on the YouTube channel, once Reese and I go past the gaskin, we actually start to hit the ghost boat circuit, and you'll see a couple of them. Okay, cool. Yeah, so that's basically, so a few years ago, they were not lined. And like I said, I would always use them as a navigational challenge to go find them. But I was like, you know what, in order to allow people to go out there, we should probably line it all. So that way it's a nice circuit. There's a few things you got to keep in mind. Like you said, you have a 40 pony with you. So that's more than enough to do it. Do the gas plan. But again, happy to have the conversation about it. It's a fun little dive. And if you did it from Centene Park, depending on your finning speed, it's somewhere in the 30 to 40 minute sort of range. So it's very doable on a, steel 120 or a steel 133, steel 100. 30 cubic foot's fine for that dive. Although at some point I would encourage you to think about that 10 extra cubic feet or even more, or get comfortable with an 80. It's funny how I have progressed my diving because use 119 is good. Yep. My diving progressed. I was like, oh, well, when I start to be able to do that gaskin swim, I was like, I started to do it with a 40 cubic foot pony tank and a steel 133 on my back, high pressure. And I was like, you know what? I've got more than enough gas, of course. Now I would never do the gaskin dive with a smaller, like a 40. I would just take my 80 because I'm so comfortable with an 80. Yep. So 133 cubic foot tank. That used to be my go-to tank back in the day. Now I just dive with the 100s. They're nice and tiny. But you got to remember, it doesn't really matter because you're planning for disaster, and disaster means if the 133 went away, do I still have enough like gas in my backup tank, which would be my pony, right? So, wrapping up the DPV, is there anything more? Because like I said, I'm not a guru here. Is there anything else I could help or anything you wanted to know about DPV that I might know? And if I don't know, I've got some good buddies who are DPV gurus. So cool. That's true. That is true. What are we at? Well, yeah, we're an hour, 10 minutes in. So that's pretty much all I got tonight, man. I mean, it's the longest live session yet. And I wonder, is like, if we get a few more people on this chat eventually, good God, well, how long is it going to be? It's going to take a while. I appreciate it, TS. Look forward to meeting you, of course. And till the next time, practice hard, dive safe. Later.